In the middle of my sister's wedding, my husband came close and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." I thought it was strange, but he looked serious, pale. In the car, the silence was heavy, until he looked at me and said, "Did you really not notice what's going on?" Caroline's heels clicked softly against the stone pathway as she stepped to the courtyard of the Magnolia Mansion in Charleston. The late afternoon sun filtered through the magnolia trees, casting golden specks across the white floral arrangements that lined the ceremony aisle. It was the kind of day you'd bottle up if you could. Light breeze, not too warm, laughter floating over string quartet music. Her younger sister, Emily, had never looked more radiant, wrapped in layers of lace and grace. Everything was perfect. Caroline adjusted her fitted, satin blue dress and smiled as she watched the newlyweds sway to the rhythm of their first dance. Adam, her husband, stood near the bar chatting with Emily's college friend. He looked calm, his hands in his pockets, his blazer slightly rumpled from a humid air. Caroline reached for a champagne flute, thinking how proud her parents would have been to see both their daughters finding happiness. Then Adam caught her eye. He didn't smile. He didn't raise a glass. He started walking toward her. At first, she thought he might just want to sneak away from the crowd for a few minutes of quiet. But something in his pace, too fast to be casual, too steady to be nervous, froze her in place. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to leave. Now." She blinked. "What?" "Caroline," he said, his voice tighter, lower. "Please, I'll explain. We can't be here." The music played on. People cheered as the couple dipped in a romantic spin. But Caroline's heart began to pound. Adam's hand was firm on her arm now, not painful, but with an insistence that made her skin crawl. "What's going on?" she asked again. He didn't answer. He just led her through the side of the tent, past the linen-draped tables, ignoring the glances they drew. Emily's eyes met hers for a split second, puzzled, but there wasn't time to wave or smile. The urgency in Adam's movements pulled Caroline along like a tide. They reached the car parked by the gravel entrance. Adam opened the passenger door, and for a second, Caroline hesitated. "Adam," she said slowly, "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what this is about." His jaw tensed. "Caroline, please, just get in. I promise. I'll explain everything." The seriousness in his voice didn't sound like paranoia. It sounded like fear. Real, tangible fear. She slid into the seat. The door slammed. He turned the ignition, and they peeled away from the venue, the elegant lights of the wedding fading in the rear-view mirror. The silence in the car was thick. Caroline could barely breathe. They drove for 10 minutes. Then 20. She turned to him. "You're scaring me." Adam's eyes were fixed on the road. "I know. I didn't want this. I really didn't. But I heard something I can't ignore." "What did you hear?" she asked, voice trembling. He hesitated. Then finally he spoke. "Do you remember the two guys standing by the back bar? The ones in the black suits?" Caroline nodded. "I think so. They weren't family. They weren't guests either. I checked the seating list," Adam said. "They weren't supposed to be there." She frowned. "So they crashed the wedding?" "Not exactly," he replied. "They weren't there to party." Caroline stared at him. "What does that mean?" He took a deep breath, like it pained him to say it out loud. "I overheard them talking. One of them mentioned Emily's name, and something about a wire transfer that needed to stay off the radar. The words sank into her like lead. "Wait, Emily? What kind of transfer?" "I don't know," Adam said, glancing at her. But the way they said it, it wasn't casual. It was deliberate, like they were involved in something. Caroline shook her head slowly. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe they were talking about someone else. "Caroline." His tone was sharper now. "I work in risk analysis. When I hear those words, off the radar, clean wire, backdoor routing, I don't assume coincidence. That's the language of money laundering, or worse." She stared at him, mouth dry. "You think someone in my family is involved?" "I think someone at that wedding is involved. And it's not just anyone." They mentioned Emily. Her chest tightened. She looked out the window at the South Carolina countryside blurring past. Her sister, with her perfect white dress and innocent smile. She couldn't picture her doing anything illegal. Not Emily. Not the baby of the family. "This is insane," Caroline murmured. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure I heard what I heard," Adam said. "I'm not saying Emily knows, but something is wrong. And I don't think it's safe to go back until we understand what." Caroline sat in silence. Her wedding ring felt heavy on her finger. The scent of gardenias clung to her hair from the wedding flowers. A moment ago, she had been celebrating. Now she was escaping, running. She turned to Adam again. "What do we do now?" He looked at her, and this time, his face softened. "We start asking questions. Carefully, quietly. Because if we're right, this doesn't just end with a couple of strangers whispering at a wedding." Caroline exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of her seat as the car disappeared into the darkening road. And in her gut, something told her nothing about this night would ever be the same again. The soft hum of the air conditioning in the car filled the silence between them as they pulled into the dimly lit driveway of their suburban home on the outskirts of Charleston. Caroline's hands trembled slightly as she unbuckled her seatbelt, the gravity of the night settling in her chest like a weight she couldn't shake off. Adam killed the engine but made no move to exit the car. He just sat there, staring at the garage door ahead as if waiting for it to open on its own, or perhaps bracing himself for whatever conversation was about to follow. Caroline glanced at him, her voice barely above a whisper, almost afraid to hear more. "Tell me everything." Adam finally turned to her, his jaw tense. It started with the voices. I wasn't even paying attention at first. I was looking for the bartender when I caught part of their conversation. It was the way they were speaking, quiet but clipped like two people trying to hide something and failing at it. Caroline stayed still, her fingers curled tightly in her lap as he continued. One of them mentioned a name, Lindsay. Then the other said something like, "The transfer can't draw attention." Not with her sister's husband here. That's when I started to actually listen. They said it so casually, like it was routine. But then they mentioned your sister. Caroline swallowed hard. "Lindsay? As in Emily's fiancée?" Adam nodded. That's when I started putting things together. I thought it was weird that they'd mention her and a transfer in the same breath. At first, I assumed it might be some wedding expense they were trying to keep off the books. But then I heard another phrase, shell account. That's not a wedding term. That's financial fraud. Her stomach twisted. Lindsay had always been private, but nothing about her had ever suggested she was involved in anything criminal. Still, Adam's tone left little room for doubt. He looked at her with a steady, dark gaze. I've worked with enough internal audit teams to know when someone's using fake accounts to move money. Whoever those men were, they're part of something much bigger. And Lindsay's name shouldn't have come up unless she's involved. Caroline leaned back against the headrest, staring at the roof of the car as if the answers might be written in the upholstery. Her mind began to race through every conversation she'd ever had with Lindsay, every small hesitation, every vague comment about money or stress. "You think she's laundering money?" "I don't know exactly what she's doing," Adam said. "But whatever it is, it's not clean. And it's happening now. Tonight wasn't random, Caroline. They were watching her, and I think they knew I noticed." She turned to him, her eyes wide. "Do you think we're in danger?" Adam didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly opened the door and stepped out, motioning for her to follow. She gathered her dress and exited the car, heels clicking against the concrete as they made their way inside. The house felt cold, darker than usual, as if the shadows themselves had deepened while they were away. Adam locked the door behind them and double-checked the deadbolt before turning on the lights. Once in the kitchen, he opened his laptop, typed a password with practice speed, and brought up a secure spreadsheet. "There's more," he said, rotating the screen toward her. Caroline leaned in. The screen showed several lines of transactions, amounts ranging from $10,000 to $65,000, move across 3 accounts in the past 6 weeks. The accounts were all linked to a single name, Lindsay Whitmore. Caroline felt her knees weaken. "Where did you get this?" I've been watching that name since earlier this week, he said. Not because I suspected anything, but because of something odd I saw at work. A flagged transaction that passed through one of our international partners. The origin account matched a shell company registered in Nevada, but the recipient was a private individual here in Charleston, Lindsay. I didn't even connect it until tonight. She backed away from the counter, as if putting distance between herself and the truth could soften the blow. But why would Lindsay be involved in something like this? She's a school counselor, for God's sake. She doesn't even like talking about money. That's the thing, Adam said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. People like her are perfect for this. No one would suspect her. And if someone needed a clean front to move money, they'd pick someone with no record, a respectable job, a good story. Caroline paced the room, trying to absorb what she was hearing. The idea that her sister's future wife might be involved in a criminal enterprise wasn't just unsettling, it was absurd. And yet the evidence Adam had uncovered painted a picture too vivid to ignore. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice cracking. Adam paused before answering. "We can't go to the police yet. Not without knowing who else is involved. If this thing goes deep, and I think it does, then exposing it the wrong way could backfire. We could get your sister dragged into it. Or worse, we could get ourselves hurt." Caroline pressed a hand to her forehead. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and disbelief. "So, what do you suggest?" "We watch. We ask questions. Quietly. And we start by talking to someone who might know more, without even realizing it." She turned to him. "Who?" Adam closed the laptop, his voice steady. "Megan, your other sister. She was around Lindsay a lot during the wedding prep. If Lindsay slipped up, Megan might have caught something." Caroline nodded slowly, the pieces starting to align, though none of them offered comfort. "You think Megan knows?" "I think she might know something," Adam said. "And if we want to get ahead of this before it explodes, we need to find out what that is." Caroline sat at the edge of the sofa, staring at the floor. The glow from a hallway light cast long shadows across the hardwood. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A neighbor's car pulled into a driveway. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened. But inside this house, everything had changed. And for the first time since the wedding began, Caroline realized the celebration might have only been a cover. Caroline waited until morning before calling Megan. She didn't sleep much. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes of the wedding, the whispered names, and the look on Adam's face as he showed her the transaction logs would jolt her awake again. At 6 o'clock in the morning, she finally gave up trying to rest. She got dressed in silence, avoiding the mirror because even her own reflection now felt unfamiliar, like the woman staring back had stepped into someone else's life. When Megan answered the phone, her voice was still groggy, caught somewhere between sleep and irritation. "Caroline, everything okay?" "We need to talk," Caroline said quickly. "In person. Today." Megan paused, and for a moment Caroline feared she might start asking questions over the phone. But instead, she said, "All right, come over." Megan lived in a small colonial-style house downtown, tucked between two larger, more imposing properties that belonged to Charleston's older families. Caroline arrived less than an hour later. The air was already thick with summer heat, and the sidewalk shimmered under the rising sun. She knocked twice, and when the door opened, Megan stood there barefoot, still wearing the oversized t-shirt she probably slept in, with her hair gathered in a loose knot. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Megan said, stepping aside to let her in. Caroline didn't respond. She walked straight into the living room, her arms folded, her eyes scanning the shelves, the pictures on the wall, anything to avoid her sister's face. Megan joined her a moment later, holding a mug of coffee. "Okay, what's going on?" "I need to ask you something," Caroline began, trying to steady her voice. "And I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest." Megan blinked. "Sure. About what?" "Lindsay." Megan tilted her head, confused. "Lindsay? What about her?" Caroline took a deep breath. "Did she ever ask you for help with money? Or anything involving accounts, paperwork, bank details? Anything like that?" The silence that followed was sharp. Megan looked away, biting the inside of her cheek. It was a subtle movement, but Caroline saw it: hesitation, doubt, guilt. She said she needed help covering some last-minute expenses. Megan said carefully, "Nothing weird, just venue stuff, the catering upgrades, the open bar. I offered to put some things on my card until after the honeymoon. It wasn't a big deal." "That's not what I'm talking about," Caroline pressed. "I mean real money, Meg. Transfers, investments, things that don't go through official wedding planners." Now Megan's face changed. Her brow furrowed and her lips parted slightly. "Why are you asking me this?" Caroline moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because Adam heard something last night, and then he found something. Financial activity tied to Lindsay that doesn't make sense. And there's more. Her name is showing up on accounts connected to companies that don't exist." Megan sat down slowly, her mug forgotten on the coffee table. "Wait, what?" "She's using people's names," Caroline continued. "Maybe even mine. She's moving money through shell companies. We don't know how deep this goes, but if you're involved, even by accident, you need to tell me now." Megan's expression collapsed under the weight of the accusation. She shook her head, eyes wide. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was anything like that." Caroline's stomach dropped. "So she did ask you for something?" She said she was trying to avoid taxes. Megan admitted reluctantly that her family couldn't know where some of the money was coming from. "She told me it was just a temporary workaround. Something about an offshore account that belonged to a friend who owed her a favor. I thought it was sketchy, yeah, but not illegal." "And you believe that?" "I wanted to believe it," Megan said, her voice cracking. She was under so much pressure. The wedding, her job, her mom breathing down her neck. "I thought she just didn't want to look like she needed help." Caroline sat down beside her, overwhelmed. "What exactly did she have you do?" "I helped her set up a payment app," Megan said after a pause. "She needed a secondary email and a backup number for verification. I let her use mine. Then she asked if she could transfer some funds through my old checking account. It was mostly inactive, and she said she just needed to route something small through it. It sounded harmless." Caroline closed her eyes, trying to stay calm. "How much money went through that account?" "I don't know," Megan admitted. "A few transfers. One was $10,000. Another was maybe $20. I didn't ask questions. She said she'd delete everything once the wedding was paid off." "You realize what that sounds like, right?" Megan nodded slowly, looking sick. "I didn't think it was this serious. I thought I was just helping." The room went still for a long moment. Caroline felt the edges of her world shrinking. "She could have used my name too. Adam thinks she might have. We need to check." "I'll log in," Megan said, reaching for a phone. She typed in her password, then scrolled through her banking app, her face going pale as she counted. "Caroline, there's been more activity. After the wedding." "How much?" "Another transfer. $15,000. 2 days ago." Caroline stood up, pacing now. "We have to confront her." "She'll deny it," Megan said, her voice barely audible. "And if she's working with someone dangerous, this could get worse." "I'm not going to sit around while she drags our names into something criminal," Caroline snapped. "She married Emily. She's part of this family now. If she's lying to us, I want the truth." Megan looked up at her, eyes glassy. "You really think she'd do this on purpose?" Caroline didn't answer right away. Her thoughts were a storm. She wanted to believe there was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But the numbers didn't lie. And Lindsay's calm, collected demeanor, her ease in navigating a world that didn't match her supposed income, suddenly felt suspicious. "She used your account. She probably used mine. She's hiding something, and until we find out what, no one is safe." As Caroline drove away from Megan's house, her phone buzzed. A text from Adam. "You need to come home. I found something about the company linked to your name." The fear returned, sharper now, more personal. Lindsay's lies weren't just touching the edges of Caroline's life anymore. They were burrowing into the core of it. Caroline barely paused to take her shoes off when she walked to the front door. Adam was already in the living room, sitting with his laptop open, his expression drawn and serious. The blinds were shut, casting the room in a pale gray light that matched the tone of her thoughts. He didn't say anything at first. He just gestured for her to sit next to him. Caroline obeyed, and as soon as she sat, he turned the screen toward her. Her eyes scanned the web page, a business registry database. At the top, a company name appeared in bold black letters. Caroline's name was listed below it, next to the title Chief Financial Officer. She blinked. What is this? Adam exhaled slowly. This company was registered 2 months ago in Delaware. It's a shell, no real services, no employees, no website. But the registration details use your full name, your old Charleston address, and email tied to your college alumni account. She stared at the screen, a sick feeling curling in her stomach. I've never even heard of this company. I know, Adam said. I pulled the incorporation documents. Whoever did this used your information without you knowing. And the worst part? That company received 3 transfers in the last 6 weeks. The total amount is over $180,000. Caroline couldn't breathe. She leaned forward, hands gripping her knees. They're using me. Adam nodded. It's identity fraud. But it's more than that. They didn't just use your name to open a fake company. They're running money through it. You're the fall person. She felt the weight of that truth settle on her chest. If anything happens, if this gets investigated, I'm the one they'll come after. Exactly, Adam said, which is why we need to act before someone else does. Caroline stood up and began pacing. Why me? Why my name? Why now? Adam hesitated, then said, I don't think it's just about you. I think it's about proximity. Lindsay probably didn't have access to Megan's information beyond that old account, but she's been around you more. She's seen your personal mail, your documents. She knows your maiden name, your previous addresses. She had what she needed. And she used it, Caroline muttered, without hesitation. Adam clicked through several more documents. There's another detail. One of the wire transfers that passed through the fake company came from an account associated with a gaming syndicate in Florida. It's flagged on a federal watch list. Not heavily, but enough to raise red flags if anyone does a deep audit. Caroline froze. A gaming syndicate? He nodded, which might explain how this all started. Gambling debts. That would line up with what you said Megan heard about Lindsay owing someone. Caroline sat back down. So she took a deal, got into something bigger than she realized. And now she's dragging all of us into it. Adam closed the laptop and turned to her. We need help. Real help. We can't do this on our own anymore. You mean a lawyer? And the FBI, he said. If this gets worse, they'll find it. But if we come forward now, we can at least protect ourselves. Caroline looked at him, fear tightening her voice. Will they believe us? That I didn't know? If we come clean before it surfaces in an investigation, yes. But we have to move fast. Once this money moves out of the shell company's account, it disappears. She nodded slowly, absorbing reality. Then she looked up. Before we go to anyone, I want to talk to her. Adam raised an eyebrow. Caroline, I need to look her in the eye, she said firmly. I need to hear her say it. I need her to know what she did. Adam didn't argue. He simply reached for his phone and pulled up a contact. Then we do it now, before she vanishes too. They arranged to meet Lindsay that evening. Caroline sent a text, careful to sound calm, just a casual request to grab coffee and decompress after the whirlwind of the wedding. Lindsay replied almost immediately, friendly, unaware. She suggested a small cafe on East Bay Street, one of those cozy Charleston spots with mismatched chairs and overpriced espresso. When Caroline walked into the cafe just before 7 o'clock, Lindsay was already there, sipping an iced latte, her hair pulled into a tight bun, still glowing from the wedding weekend. She smiled brightly when she saw Caroline. Hey, you look exhausted. Caroline sat down across from her and folded her hands on the table. We need to talk. Lindsay's smile faded slightly. Is something wrong? I want you to tell me the truth, Caroline said calmly. No deflection. No sweet talk. just the truth. Lindsay looked confused, but leaned in. Okay, I know about the accounts, Caroline said. I know you use Megan. I know about the transfers. And I know you use my name to open a company. Lindsay froze, her mouth opening just a fraction before she recovered. I think you're confused. Don't, Caroline snapped. I'm not confused. I've seen the documents. I've seen the transactions. I know everything. The mask finally cracked. Lindsay sat back in her chair, the light in her eyes dimming. She looked around the cafe, then back at Caroline. Her voice dropped low. You weren't supposed to find that. But I did. Lindsay exhaled sharply, then shrugged. It was temporary, just to get through a rough patch. The money was never going to stay in those accounts. It was just passing through my name. Caroline hissed, You framed me. I didn't frame you, Lindsay said quickly. I protected you. If anything had gone wrong, I could have handled it. You'd never even have known. You used me. I did what I had to do, Lindsay said, her voice rising now. Do you think Emily's family would have ever accepted me if they knew I was broke? If they knew I owed money to people who don't forget? I fixed it. I cleaned it. And I gave her the wedding she deserved. Caroline stood. You're going to tell her everything. No, Lindsay said firmly. You're not going to say a word. Because if you do, they'll come after you too. You think those names on the documents stop with me? You think I did all this alone? Caroline stared at her, the threat sinking in like poison. You think you can go to the cops, Lindsay whispered. But they'll ask how you didn't notice your name on a company, how your address ended up on wire transfers. You'll be in this just as deep as I am. Caroline left the cafe without another word. Outside, the sky was dark, and the street lamps flickered to life. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from Adam. Our lawyer is waiting. We need to go. Now, the office of David Keller, a federal defense attorney known for his discretion and unflinching directness, was located on the upper floor of a discreet brick building in Mount Pleasant. The waiting room was spare. No frills, no distractions, just a couple of chairs, a worn carpet, and a receptionist who barely looked up as Caroline and Adam walked in. Keller greeted them in a modest but organized office, wearing a gray suit that seemed intentionally bland. He spoke with an economy of words that felt rehearsed but efficient, the way someone who had seen far too many lives upended by hidden truths and financial schemes might speak to clients on the edge of legal catastrophe. He listened quietly as Caroline and Adam explained the situation in full, the stolen identity, the shell company, the financial transfers, Lindsay's confession at the cafe. He asked a few questions about timelines, names, and access. He jotted down brief notes, but mostly watched Caroline, gauging her reactions, her control, her stability under pressure. When the narrative was complete, he folded his hands and leaned back. You're not guilty. That much is clear. But right now, the paper trail doesn't care whether you knew or not. If this company remains tied to your name and a federal investigation begins, your innocence won't matter at first. What matters is getting ahead of the storm. Caroline swallowed, her fingers intertwined in her lap. What do? We go to the FBI, Keller said. We do it voluntarily. You offer them everything. Your access, your testimony, your files. It has to look like what it is. You're not hiding, you're cooperating. The sooner we go, the better chance we have at keeping you from becoming a primary target. Adam nodded beside her. We've compiled all the bank logs and registration details. Good, Keller said. Bring them. I'll make the call and set up a meeting. But Caroline, he added, his voice steady, you have to be prepared. This will get messy. Even if they believe you, your name is attached to something serious. There will be interviews, background checks, maybe even subpoenas. You'll be part of the investigation, whether you want to be or not. Caroline took a long breath and nodded. I understand. When they left the office, the sun had begun to set, casting a pale orange hue across the parking lot. The silence in the car on the way home was heavier than any previous night, not with confusion, but with resolution. There was no longer room for denial. There was only the path forward. By the next afternoon, Keller had secured a preliminary meeting with the Charleston field office of the FBI. Caroline sat at a long glass table across from two agents, one older, wearing a dated blazer and a stern expression, and the other younger, sharper, with keen eyes that missed nothing. They listened as Caroline presented the files, the emails, the shell company data. Keller walked them through the documentation with clinical precision, emphasizing the fraud and Caroline's status as an unwilling participant. The agents didn't reveal much. They asked pointed questions about Lindsay's background, her access to documents, any potential accomplices. They requested copies of Megan's bank activity and asked if anyone else in the family might have been approached. Caroline answered each one carefully, conscious that every word mattered. When the meeting ended, they said they would follow up soon. Keller nodded respectfully, then escorted Caroline and Adam out. "They believe you," he said quietly as they exited. "But this is just the beginning. The real test comes when they start pulling threads." Back at home, Caroline found herself standing in the hallway outside her bedroom, staring at a wedding photo of Emily and Lindsay placed neatly on a shelf. Emily's face radiated joy, utterly oblivious to the shadow that had been woven into her perfect day. The pain of it was nearly unbearable. Caroline picked up the frame, held it for a moment, then carefully set it down, face down on the shelf. Emily needed to know. The next day, Caroline met with her sister in a park near the waterfront. Emily arrived smiling, her energy light and carefree. But when Caroline's eyes failed to mirror her expression, the smile faded. "What's going on?" Emily asked, sitting beside her on the bench. "I need to tell you something," Caroline began, her voice taut with emotion. "It's about Lindsay." Emily's brow furrowed. "Is she okay?" "She's not who you think she is," Caroline said. "And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. She used Megan. She used me. She's been involved in something illegal, and now the FBI is investigating her." Emily froze, blinking as if the words hadn't registered. "What are you talking about?" Caroline laid it all out. The fake company, the stolen identity, the transfers, Lindsay's quiet admission at the cafe, every detail. Emily listened in stunned silence, her face crumbling with each passing minute. By the time Caroline finished, tears had begun to well in her sister's eyes. "She told me she was trying to protect me," Emily whispered. "She said everything she did was for us, for the future. She lied to you," Caroline said gently. "She lied to all of us." Emily sat for a long moment, then wiped her face and stood. "I have to talk to her. She might already know what's coming," Caroline said. "She might run." "I don't care," Emily said. "I need to hear from her mouth." That night, Lindsay was brought in for questioning. The FBI moved quickly. Whether it was Caroline's cooperation or the damning paper trail that forced their hand, they didn't wait long. Caroline was informed of the details, but Megan called early the next morning, her voice shaky, telling her that agents had shown up at Lindsay's workplace. By noon, it was all over town. The scandal spread faster than Caroline had feared. News broke across local networks. Charleston school counselor under federal investigation for financial fraud. While her name wasn't in the headlines, Caroline knew it wouldn't take long for curious eyes to start asking questions. Over the following weeks, Caroline withdrew from most social activities. She focused on cleaning her name, sitting for interviews, providing documents, and working closely with Keller to ensure nothing slipped through the cracks. Emily, meanwhile, moved in with their aunt temporarily, too shattered by Lindsay's betrayal to remain in the home they had built together. One evening, nearly 2 months after the arrest, Megan came over. The two sisters sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, the air between them calmer, less frantic than before. Megan's voice broke the silence. "I should have known," she said. "I should have asked more questions." "We all should have," Caroline replied. "But we can't go back. We can only move forward." "And rebuild," Megan added. Caroline nodded, glancing out the window. "Exactly. Rebuild."